Okay, welcome everybody to the only Filipino American History Museum in the country. My name is Erwin Mina. I am the current board president of the museum. One of my goals when I became president this year was to have an exhibit of Larry Itliong. He deserves the recognition for his contributions to the Filipino labor movement and social justice in America. I was born and raised in Delano, grew up in a farm camp, labor camp, just east of town. Son of a manong, who was the foreman, my mother, who was the cook, for many labor and worked in the grape fields. This exhibit is near and dear to my heart. I experienced the hardship and inequities of how the Manongs were treated. Larry Itliong was a unifying leader for equity and civil rights in the fields for farm laborers. His fight for justice paved the way for better wages and working conditions. And one in particular would be the pesticides. He exemplified the Manong's message of educating yourself so that you can have a better life. There's not a day that I think that the Manongs I thank the Manongs for my family's successes. Without the Manongs and Larry Itliong, none of this would ever happen. This is why we created this Larry Itliong exhibit for all of you to learn and see. I'd like to thank the Larry Itliong Exhibit Committee for their hard work and long hours and creating the exhibit. Galing Galing, which is translated means job well done. Corey, my wife, I dragged her all over the West Coast, from Seattle, Delano, Pismo Beach, to the Big Island of Hawaii and back again, to get the information for the exhibit. She and June Bond and the committee put the stories and photographs in beautiful context. June Bond has been a total pleasure to work with. Her style and grace and expertise is reflected in the detail of this exhibit. Bev Encampo isn't here today, but she played a huge role in this project. She wanted to apologize to Patty, as she wanted to talk and tell her a personal story with her uncle Larry. Paul Chavez, thank you to the Chavez family. Paul for their support over the years. Dolores Huerta and Emilio Huerta. The support to our cause and for social justice and activism throughout the years. Thank you very much. Max Becerra, Mr. Delano. Without his support and helping me with connecting with all of these people, he was instrumental in creating this exhibit. Thank you, Max. Joel Lindehau, Mayor of Delano, for making time with his beautiful family. Cheryl, Jager, Costa, and Ari. We do this because of you guys. We do this because maybe one day you'll have that curiosity about your history and your past. Maybe get a little identity and know where you're going. Benjamin Stone, Stanford University, Cecil H. Green, Department of Special Collections, for allowing us to have Bob Fitch photography and archives. Gail Ramasata, cousin, thank you for taking the baton and taking the Larry Itliong story to another level. Larry the musical will all be there this year. Rob Bonta for sending his representative and also being an example for all Americans. The museum board who are present today. Jay Pollard, Benny Magdown, Dr. Richard Tanasa, and Jalissa Cummings for allowing the Larry Itliong exhibit to become a reality. FAHMS chapter, Linda, Raina, Amelia, for the support you've given us throughout the year. Professor Debbie Louie, who isn't here today, but when I show this video, she was one of the young instructors at UC Santa Cruz that actually recorded the voice of Larry Itliong. So when I play this, please pay attention. Mel Lagasca, my manong, my mentor, for all his words of wisdom and knowledge of the Filipino American history. Thank you, Mel. And also all of you who all showed up here out of your busy lives. So with that, I'm going to quickly show a video, and also, so please listen.
Larry Itliong immigrated from the Philippines when he was 15 and began working immediately. He harvested crops in Montana and Washington, and he canned fish in Alaska. These years as a migrant laborer instilled a deep commitment to the rights of workers that would guide the rest of his life. Larry later moved to Stockton, California, and became involved in the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee, which was attempting to form a union for farm laborers. He was so successful organizing workers that committee leaders asked him to move to Delano, where thousands of Filipinos were employed in the grain fields. On September 8, 1965, he led more than 2,000 Filipino farm workers in a labor strike in Delano.
Not yet.
They demanded higher wages, better working conditions, and the right to form a union.
We feel that we farm workers should have an organization for all.
Credit where credit's due. They had walked off the vineyards a week before he convinced Cesar Chavez and his National Farm Workers Association to join the strike. The two leaders soon merged their organizations under a new name, the United Farm Workers, with Larry Itliong as assistant director.
I'm going to be very frank. I'm not scared of nothing. I'm sorry.
The Delano Farm Workers strike lasted for 5 years and resulted in one of the most important victories in the history of American labor. Although the spotlight usually fell on Cesar Chavez, history has begun to acknowledge Larry Itliong's critical role in the struggle. Hard-charging, cigar-smoking, poker-playing, brilliant, Larry Itliong continued to be a leader in the Filipino American community for the rest of his life, and is finally getting the recognition he earned as a founding figure in the California labor movement.
Okay, I was remiss on one of my thank yous. It was Terry Torres. She's been part of this organization for a long time, and she's kept us centered. And I just wanted to tell her that our project was on time and on budget. Thank you.
I thank you.
Okay. So with that, Jay, we'll ask that Patty, please cut the cord. No. Okay. No. She's gonna cut. Patty, can you cut that? Talk to us about the making.
Hi everybody. I'm going to give a little background of how we got involved.
Excuse me. Sorry, I'm on the way.
And I'm trying to take it there, but I can go away. Okay. I'm sorry, but like I said, we're started not lot of the leaders, but his unity and his stuff, actually. We have an organization here called the Community Service Organization, and we formed labor committees within the CSO. So I was in charge of one of the committee, and I was in the we called it ALA, Agricultural Workers Association. And I had a OP organizer, I had a Mexican organizer, I had a black organizer, but we needed a Filipino organizer, okay? So I had a lot of Filipino friends in Stockton. By the way, Ray Polar, he was up right there, and I went to grammar school, middle school, and high school together. So I went to all my Filipino friends that I knew. I said, I'm trying to find an organizer to help us organize farm workers. And everybody kept giving me one name, Larry Itliong. Larry Itliong. Larry Itliong. I went to see Mr. Huerta, who was like, he had the big gambling place in Stockton. Same thing, Larry Itliong. So I set out on my quest to find Larry Itliong. I finally got his address. He was living in Conway Homes at that time. It had just been built, and Larry was there. So I went to Larry's house, and I had a meeting with Larry. I said, Larry, I'm trying to organize farm workers here in Stockton, and could you help me? Larry was a man of very few words, okay? He listened to what I had to say, and then he said, okay, I'll help you. So then he joined the Community Service Organization and became part of our Farm Labor Committee. So we were organizing, we probably had about a couple hundred farm workers that were in our organization, AWA. So we were also working with some Catholic priests at that time, and these priests, they went in a Volkswagen all the way to Washington, D.C., and they talked to George Meany, who was the head of the AFL at that time. So George Meany sent somebody down to see what our group looked like. And so we had our first meeting at St. Mary's Hall, right in Stockton. And when they saw how many workers we had organized, they decided that they would send an organizer. And so they sent a man named Norm Smith, who had worked with the United Auto Workers in the South, and they sent him to organize. So I was hired as the secretary of the group, and then I had them hire all my organizers, okay? And so they hired Larry Itliong as one of those organizers. So we were doing really good, we were having big meetings, and but then they brought in some guy named Lou Crayon, and then he said, well, we shouldn't have meetings anymore. I said, what do you think we shouldn't have meetings anymore? So he said, no, you gotta cancel the meeting. Well, I didn't want to do that. So I left. Chavez was organizing Oxnard at the same time that I was working up here. And he had organized a large group of farm workers in Oxnard, and then he turned his workers over to the union, and then it kind of fell apart. So I left that organization, and that's when Tessa and I started the National Farm Workers Association. But Larry stayed behind with AWOC. That's what we formed the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee. But Larry and I always kept in touch. Because when I would come to Stockton, I would go see Larry. When he was in Delano, he would call me, and I would go meet with Larry, okay? So before the Delano Grape strike started, Larry got in touch with me. And he said he had just had a strike in Coachella, and they got a wage increase to $1.25 an hour. Now, farm workers at that time were getting paid about 90 cents an hour. So that was a big wage increase, okay? And so Larry and I met, and he said, well, we want to do a strike in Delano. So I told Larry, okay, I went to the meeting, they had this big meeting. Larry was such a strong leader, a lot of the workers didn't want to go on strike. They told Larry in that meeting, we just did a strike in Coachella. I remember one of the workers pulled out his pocket and he said, our pockets are empty. We don't want to go on strike. So Larry convinced them that they had to go on strike. So then I told Larry, well, let's get a meeting with you and Cesar together, okay? So I introduced Larry to Cesar Chavez, and they had a meeting, and the rest is history. So Filipino workers went out on strike on September the 8th. And at first, we didn't know whether it was going to be like a wildcat strike, because sometimes workers do wildcat strikes just to get a wage increase, and then they go back to work, no? So the strike went on for a week, and then what happened, there was so much brutality against the workers. They were beaten up by the employers. They were already on the labor camps. Most of the monopolies, they lived in the labor camps, right? They cut off the lights and the gas and the water, so they couldn't even drink water or cook. So then our group, the National Farmers Association, we called a big meeting. We said to everybody here, are we going to support the Filipinos on strike? What do we say? And everybody said, yes, we did. And that is how history was made. So we joined forces. Eventually, we joined both organizations, AWOC, the United Farm Workers, and it became AFWOC, okay? So that is the history. Of course, I don't have to tell everybody what a strong leader Larry was to the very last. And oftentimes, people within his own group, there would be some people when we had problems with the Teamsters. And some of his own group said, no, we should go with the Teamsters, forget this Chavez guy, okay? But Larry said no. Larry said, not only that, but the strike went on for a long time, for 5 years, right? And so Larry said, we've got to come together, we've got to eat together. So in the label, they had what they call Filipino Hall, right? And so all of the Filipino workers, they put the kitchen there. Filipino Hall is still there. It's also, I think, a very memorialized place. And the strike went on and on and on. Larry was our leader, along with Cesar Chavez. So I just want to say to everybody who was a great leader, thank you very much for this tribute. I hope to come back and you'll be able to see it a lot more closely. And I'm sorry that I have to leave. Okay? But thank you very much for inviting me. My sister who was here a minute ago. Where'd she go? Alicia?
She's in the back. She's in the back.
Her name is Alicia Along. Okay? So I have, because of my sister, I have about 20 nephews and nieces that are Filipino, Mexican. Okay? And my son, Emilio Huerta, is also here with me today.
Right, show me over.
Thank you very much.
Good deal.
We're so glad that you were able to come. The process for putting all of this together started with Erwin's idea that he wanted to put a project together, an exhibit together of honoring Larry Itliong. And that started with him calling various people on the board and asking, what do you think about this idea? I have this idea, I think we can do it. We get together and start to work on it in October. And so we just started doing some research, exchanging ideas. And then in July, the Barrio Fiesta happened. And by chance, a graphic designer by the name of Voltaire Victorio approached the table and started talking about his work. And business cards were exchanged, and Erwin invited him to a meeting where we just kind of sat and brainstormed about some of the things that we've been thinking about, some of the pictures that we were perusing, and information that we thought was important about Larry Itliong, what should go in that into the exhibit. Voltaire sat quietly and just listened to us, took a few notes, asked a few clarifying questions, and then said, well, I think I got it. I think I know what you guys want. Let me put some things together. And so he did, we liked what he put together, and he started working. Now, all of that started in August, and we've been emailing back and forth and putting verbiage under pictures and so forth. And so what you see here on my left on this side of the exhibit is a timeline of Larry Itliong's life, starting from when he came at the age of 14. He started to work with farm workers at the age of 15, if you can imagine. And that timeline takes you all the way to 2024 with the opening of the musical, Larry the Musical in the Bay Area. On this side, on my left, on the east side wall, that is devoted to the Delano strike, to the Great Boycott. And what you'll see are pictures that show a couple of important things that we want to share with you. One, and Dolores talked about it, the joining of groups of people, which is what Larry Itliong believed was the strength in their making some meaningful change. That people needed to work together, that groups needed to tackle that tactic that growers were using of divide and conquer, and pitting groups of people against each other. And so that portion and that tactic was addressed with the forming of the United Farm Workers, with the two groups, the Mexicans and the Filipinos, and other groups of ethnic groups that joined in that effort. The other important thing about what happened during those 5 hard years was the recognition that the farm workers movement was much, much more than just wanting a better wage and a better way of life. It was civil rights. It was about human rights. It was about the humane treatment of other people. And people across the nation, and in fact internationally, recognized that that really was what this movement was about. It was about civil rights and human rights. And that's really, really an important aspect of what Larry Itliong and Cesar Chavez did. The structure that Voltaire put together is reminiscent of the farm labor camps, those wooden buildings, those bunkhouses, the kitchens, the houses that maybe some of the very few families lived in. And it also is reminiscent of something that was very important to Larry Itliong, and that's the Agbayani village. It was very important that the Agbayani village be built so that when the Manos became too tired and elderly to work in the fields, they had a place to retire with dignity and with our respect. This exhibit isn't finished. You're going to help us finish it. We have tiles here that Erwin brought from Delano that were left over from the construction of Agbayani Village. We're asking that every one of you, all of our guests, sign and autograph one of these tiles for us, and then we are going to integrate those tiles into the exhibit. The last thing, before you leave, we have a gift of thank you for all of you, so please don't leave without our gift, okay? Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, thank you for being here. I'm really grateful that I'm in a room sharing space with Dolores Huerta, who was here earlier, my parents, who actually my mother worked at Bayanihan House here in downtown Stockton, and we lived in Little Manila, and the family of Cesar Chavez, and my family members, quite literally my family members, and my community that I was raised by. So thank you for having me. My name is Gail Ramasanta. I co-wrote, Patty? I'm sorry. And obviously, of course, getting into Larry Itliong, Patty Itliong Serda, who has been so gracious and so lovely and so giving in the sharing of her father. I'd like all of you to understand when you are related to someone who has changed history, and I'm sure many of you understand what that feels like, the burden and the pressure of what you feel like. What does progress look like? What am I supposed to be doing? What is my legacy? If my family did this before me, if my father did this before me, if my mother did this for me, can I live up to that? And I think, well, this is a beautiful, wonderful exhibit, and a curated exhibit of Larry Itliong, because it opens the door to what does legacy mean? Why do we celebrate these great people in history? And how do we celebrate them appropriately in our lives right now to progress a movement that can be even stronger, right? In solidarity. And history is often not black and white. There's so many colors to history. In writing this story, Dr. Dawn Mabalon, rest in peace, love you, Dawn. We lost her on the day that we finished this book. And even in the retelling, the musical of Larry Itliong, the musical that's going up in San Francisco in the spring 2024, March 16th through April 14th. It's what stories do we keep and what stories do we put out for public consumption? And I think this really opens the door to understand who Larry is, but also understanding the context of how he grew up. I mean, when we look at historical figures, when we talk about Cesar Chavez, when we look at the work of Dolores Huerta, we look at the work of Larry Itliong, we have to understand what are these standards does our community have to live up to now. This is the folks who moved a huge movement, a global movement. Now these are the standards to which they give to us. And unfortunately for family members, this is huge. This is huge. You're walking uphill, this is a super challenge, it's really hard. How do we continue to understand the whys of what they did? And so in telling this story, in creating these exhibits, this beautiful exhibit, thank you FAHMS Museum, thank you Erwin, Corey, the board, we can understand a little bit of us and understand their why and understand our connection to them. I think one of some of the top things that probably shaped Larry's life, I'm assuming, really was when he landed here in the United States, obviously, and he understood the conditions of the Filipino Americans when he landed here. Probably number two was the bombing. Within 6 months of landing here was the Watsonville riots. Watsonville riots, 500 white men indiscriminately beat Filipinos, and they tried to get them out of Watsonville because of anti-Filipino racist sentiment, right? And then within a week of that, the Watsonville riots, the bombing of the Filipino Federation of America building here on San Joaquin Street was bombed by the KKK. He was a very young man, and so these really shaped, and we can understand the conditions of what shapes a leader. Can you imagine the violence that is happening to you and your community and to your bodies, and how that makes you want to rise to the occasion and bring your people with you? And so in understanding Larry, we can understand a little bit of us. And I understand myself so much more now. I really appreciate my parents. For those of you who might have remembered, my mother was a doctor at Bayanihan House, and she worked with Andy Imatan there. She was actually in the UFW archives. She wrote a letter of support to Cesar Chavez and had all the Filipino farm workers sign it back in the 70s. And the funny thing about how history is not black and white, it's very like different kinds of colors, right? My dad actually wrote that letter. When he saw the letter, he said, "Hey, I wrote that letter for your mom." But my mom signed it. My mom was busy, and my father is definitely a wordsmith. And so I want to say that this began to understand my connection to Stockton and also my connection to Larry. And I can definitely understand how the family members here, how much you carry, and how much that legacy means so much for you, but also what that legacy also means for our communities, and how do we continually understand the whys of why they did it, and how do we keep on pushing forward that movement and how can we push it forward together and understand ourselves and in turn give that to our children. So thank you for having me. This 20 sentences too long, but I really, really wanted to, yeah, and there's a little bit more of an explanation, but thank you, everybody. Little mini documentaries of the workshops that we've done to build Larry the musical, and this is just a snippet of one of them.
They always thought Dawn would be the one telling Larry Itliong's story on a national stage. She's no longer physically here, but her research is at the center now, being told in this musical. Joyful, playful, full of heart and fight, the way the heart of our people are. We're really funny, we can sing, but we can also endure a sustained struggle and win. Our history has shown us that, time and time and again. Larry Itliong, born October 25th in 1913, died on February 8, 1977 at the age of 63. He was a Filipino immigrant, farm labor organizer, and civil rights activist who led the 1965 Great Delano Grape Strike and co-founded the United Farm Workers with Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, and a diverse group of Filipino, Mexican, African American, and other folks from different nationalities. Sisters and brothers that came together to create the UFW. Dr. John Labalon was the first Pinay to graduate from Stanford University with a PhD in history. Her work on Filipino American history cemented her as one of our community's leading historians and activists. She was born and raised in Stockton, California, and her research on Larry Itliong is at the heart of this musical about Larry and about the Filipino American migration to the United States during the 1920s to the 1960s.
Okay, that was Gail Ramasata. She is the executive producer for Larry the Musical. Join in and join us. So what I'd like to do is kind of get an idea of what remarks, and since Dolores has already done hers, Patty, would you honor us and tell us what you're thinking about this?
It's an honor to be here with you all today. It is with immense pride and gratitude that I stand here before you today to commemorate the unveiling of the Larry Itliong exhibit at the FAHMS Museum here in Stockton, California. This momentous occasion not only celebrates the life and accomplishments of a remarkable man, but also serves as a beacon of inspiration for generations to come. My father, Larry Itliong, was not just a name, but a symbol of unwavering determination and a champion for justice. He dedicated his life to the betterment of the farm workers, often forgotten by society. His story was one of resilience, unity, and a relentless pursuit of fairness for those who needed it the most. In the 1960s, Larry Itliong played a pivotal role in the Delano Grape Strike, which led to the formation of the United Farm Workers. He, alongside Cesar Chavez, got farm workers from diverse backgrounds to demand better working conditions, fair wages, and the respect they deserved. His legacy is not only confined to any one community, but is transcended boundaries, touching the hearts of countless individuals who value justice and equality. The exhibit you see before you today is a testament to his tireless efforts, his dedication to the cause, and his ability to inspire change. It tells the story of a man who faced adversity with courage, who brought people together for a common purpose, and who made a profound impact on the lives of countless individuals. But let us remember that Larry Itliong's work is far from done. As we unveil this exhibit, let us be reminded of the challenges that persist in our society. And let it be fuel to our community, and let it fuel our commitment to continue the fight for justice and equality. Let it inspire us to work together, as my father did, and to create a better world for all. I want to express my deepest gratitude to the FAHMS Museum for honoring my father with this exhibit. Your commitment to preserving his memory and sharing his story is an invaluable contribution to our collective history. In closing, let us carry forward the spirit of Larry Itliong, the spirit of unity and determination, and let us ensure that his legacy remains alive, not just within these museum walls, but in our hearts, and may my father's legacy inspire you to be agents of positive change in our world. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty.
We would be remiss without having Paul talk about the Chavez family and their contributions.
Thank you.
On behalf of the farm worker movement, the Cesar Chavez Foundation, and my brothers and sisters, we want to thank you for inviting us to join you today on this special occasion and to share a couple of words and to pay our tribute to a giant in the history of farm labor and, more importantly, an important figure in American history. You know, those of us of color don't always hear enough about our heroes. And so we're here today to honor Larry Itliong, who was a hero and whose recognition is long overdue. You know, thinking back to those early days, Dolores was talking and other folks were talking about, you know, it was a difficult time nearly 60 years ago. And the thing is that Dolores talked about how they met, and the fact is that it is no coincidence that Larry and my father would cross paths. You know, even though they came from different parts of the world, different races and cultures, you know, they shared a lot in common. Larry came to the United States at the age of 15 from the Philippines, and my father was 11 years old when he migrated from his family farm in Yuma to come and work in agriculture in the Central Valley here in California in the late 30s. You know, by the time they met, Larry was a well-established labor organizer with many strikes and a lot of experience under his belt. And my dad came from the world of community organizing, where he helped organize 25 chapters of the community service organization up and down the state of California. They had a lot in common. You know, they were both men of color, they were small of stature. Neither of them came from families of wealth. They both knew poverty and their grinding lives of working in the fields and the canneries. They both endured racism and discrimination. You know, Larry and the other Itliong were victims of that cruel, racist, anti-miscegenation laws that forbade Filipino men from marrying white women. You know, my dad never forgot the signs at the restaurants that warned that no dogs or Mexicans allowed. You know, My dad would often remind us that he was a young kid, about 17 years old. He was home from leave at the Delano Theater. Took my mom on a date, and he was asked to leave the center section of the theater because that was reserved for ankles. That Mexicans and Filipinos and African Americans sat on the aisles or up in the balcony. And so they were both members of communities who were disparaged and ostracized by the communities and the towns that they made rich through their own sweat of their brows. And the thing is that they were both guided by this fierce hunger for justice that burned deeply in both of them. You know, during that epic month in September of 1965, when Larry led the Filipino workers on strike, he came to the NFWA and asked my dad and Dolores for help. Now, they had both studied history and they knew the growers' plans, how they would always separate the races, that if Filipinos went on strike, they got Mexicans to break their strikes and vice versa. And so they knew that they would have to do things differently. And so Larry and the Filipinos took the first step by striking and appealing to the NFWA to join them in their walkouts. And my dad and Dolores and the other leaders of the NFWA, the Latino, the Mexican Union, you know, they had different plans. They had planned to organize for 10 years and build a membership and a treasury, and then they would take on the growers. Well, plans changed and they had to make a decision, and they voted to go on the side of history. You know, from the beginning, my dad and Larry and the other leaders of both AWOC and NFWA knew that workers had to share the same picket lines, that they had to share the same union hall and share the same strike kitchen. And they just refused to let the growers divide them like they had done for so many decades before. You know, many people believe, and I'm one of those, that the grape strike succeeded, that long 5-year grape strikes and work had succeeded precisely because Larry and my father refused to let the growers divide Latino and Filipino farm workers. And the thing is that lesson is every bit relevant today as it was 60 years ago. You know, in preparing for this celebration, it brought back a lot of personal memories growing up. You know, I was about 8 years old in Delano when the strike started. That's when this guy used to come to our house and play with my brother and my dad's broken down Volvo in the front garden on Kensington Street. Right? But you know, a big part of growing up was the presence of Larry and the Manans. And they were an important part of our growing up, and they always, at an early age, I was always impressed by them. You know, I remember Larry growing up, and remember he was missing some fingers, and so he would smoke his cigars, you know, with his 2 fingers. And they'd be in busy meetings, and we would be kids running around. The media was there, and Larry would come over to see us, and it wasn't like he didn't have things to worry about, but he would take time out to chase us around, but then he was going to bite us with his fingers, right? You know, my brothers and sisters and other kids in the movement, other striker kids came to know and respect Larry and our Filipino uncles, as we called them. You know, they were evicted from the labor camps, where many of them had lived for decades when the strike started. They were often victims of vicious abuse and contempt and violence at the hand of growers. And you know, they had every reason in this world to be bitter. Yet, during my life, I've never met a group of more loving and gentle men. They were kind and generous to us, perhaps because many of them didn't have their own families and they adopted us as their nephews and nieces. You know, our respect for Larry and the Manans grew as we witnessed them stand up to the growers' abuse and disrespect with fearlessness and determination. So it's crucial that we continue telling and celebrating the story of Larry and the Manans, and to congratulate the FAHMS Museum for the beautiful work that you're doing here and your dedication to telling that story. Because as a nation, we have to remind ourselves and our children that American heroes come in all shapes and sizes and races and colors. And we need to acknowledge Larry's proper place in history for our sake and the sake of this country that owes so much to Larry and for the cause that he sacrificed so much for. Thank you all very much.
What a wonderful, thank you for the nice words, Paul. Okay, so moving forward, we have another video that we want to show. This is from FAHMS National, the actual founder, Auntie Dolores.
FAHMS National extends congratulations to Stockton, the National Museum in Stockton, California, for the exhibit they're showing on Larry Itliong in calling for social justice for the workers in the fields, especially those in Delano, those supplying the country with the grapes that we enjoy so much. I knew Larry, I really got to know him around 1970, and got to know him better the short time afterwards. He was an interesting man. Always had a cigar in his hand, smoking, cooking. But I remember he came up here for a meeting where Ray Pasco asked me to get together a meeting at my house. A friend and I invited a friend to meet legendary Larry Itliong, reading the newspapers. And so he came, and as he left, that after getting us all hecked up about what was happening in California, he asked a small favor of me. Can you find my cousin, Mr. Malone? So someone I hadn't seen in some time, so we did that. But as it turned out, the family of FAHMS youth group that we were there, the full-time youth activity, and we were very happy to connect. This person has done so much for Fil-Ams with someone who loved his cousin. So good luck on your wonderful exhibit, and I hope many people come and see it.
Hi, as you know, that's Auntie Dorothy, our founder and executive director. My name is Maria Batilla. I'm the service trustee for her. I want you to know that the picture in the back is a poster that was part of honoring Mr. Larry Itliong at El Centro de la Raza in an ofrenda for our old school state. And Lisa always about Larry was shown to the Latino Social Equity and Justice Organization. And they were in tears because they didn't know about the story. So thank you so much for continuing to get Larry Itliong and the Filipino contribution to the labor movement alive so that everybody will know about it. Congratulations, FAHMS Museum. Thank you.
Yeah, and so they couldn't come obviously, but they wanted to extend that out to the families of the show and all of you. We're going to kind of break from the agenda. Joe, do you have something to say?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. For many of you that don't know me, my name is Joe. I'm the current mayor of the city of Delano, and I'm happy to be here with all of y'all. I see old friends and maybe new friends today. I'm also a proud son. I'm the original monument to the city of Delano. My dad worked in the labor fields for 40 plus years. And I'm proud to say that I'm his son. I'm also proud to represent and serve my Filipino community in the city of Delano and those that are that have made Delano their home for many, many years. So I'm super excited to be here. I know we're here to honor Mr. Itliong and all the work that he's done in the labor movement. And you know, Patty and I went to high school together, and you know, all the time we were in high school, we didn't have anything better to do than, you know, mess around or have fun. And I never realized until later in my adult life that her father was a famous person, you know, and did such an awesome work in the city of Delano for the farm labor workers. And so it's really neat to see Patty go out there and tell her dad's story, and it's a neat story, and it's the best of Delano. I didn't drive all the way from Delano with nothing in my hand. I brought my family and something else. This is my wife Cheryl, my son Jagger, Costa, and Ari. This is the next generation of Filipinos that are going out there and changing the world, and I'm super proud of them. But, I know we're coming up on Larry Itliong Day. We've been talking a lot about all the work that they've done, and really the work that we've done here in this room are on their shoulders. But I also want to honor, and I brought a certificate of recognition for the FAHMS Museum, because their role in this tapestry of history is so important, because they get to preserve and tell the story over and over and over again, hopefully to future generations. So, Chuck, this certificate of recognition, the City of Delano proudly presents this certificate of recognition to the Filipino American National Historical Society and Board President Erwin Lee for their tireless dedication to preserving, promoting, and educating the world about the history, culture, and contributions of Filipino Americans to their communities, the state of California, and the nation. The City of Delano is proud to be home to many Filipino Americans and the epicenter of the Filipino farm labor movement. The City of Delano proudly supports and recognizes the efforts of FAHMS and Board President Erwin Mina in advancing Filipino culture and history throughout the world. Congratulations, sir.
To say that, to get this award is wonderful, but you can't do it without a wonderful team. And I'm surrounded with wonderful people. The board, Jim Bond, Terry, my wife Porter, Jalissa, Benny, Jay, I'm surrounded with some really, really fabulous minds, very kind people as well. But I'll accept this, and this is for them, not for me. Appreciate it. All right. I see a face out there, and Emilio, can you come up for a second? And you came all this way and say something. Emilio Huerta, everybody.
I'm not on the program, so.
We're off the menu right now.
That's right. We're off the itinerary. But thank you, Erwin, and thank you all for doing this to honor Larry, the Filipino farm movement, and of course, I think that when I think of Larry and Caesar and my mother and all the uncles and Joe Baldoy and Peter Velasco and just so many, George Catalan, Philip de la Cruz, like Paul said, we were 8-year-old whippersnappers running around, and just the generosity. They treated us like all the other nephews, giving us $1, 50 cents. They fed us. For 5 years, they fed us in Filipino farm. And when you think about their struggle, the struggle what they were doing, they took a whole generation of impoverished Filipinos, Mexicans, African Americans. As leaders, they benefited nothing from that struggle, from that fight. None of the leaders of the farm worker movement worked under union contract. And the union contracts that they were fighting for guaranteed job employment. The contract said there is no at-will, discriminatory, arbitrary, capricious termination. You have to show why you want to fire somebody. They formed bargaining committees. Here were Filipinos and Mexicans that could barely read and write. What Caesar went to the 8th grade. I don't even know what grade Larry went to. You can imagine he came here at 15, 16. And many of the Manongs came here as young boys, and they were there bargaining for wages and hours and working conditions. With corporate growers and the big law firms and their attorneys, and they were demanding that they had vacation policy, medical benefits, pension benefits, you know, they were the first environmentalists. Before we heard all of this thing about a safe environment, it was the union contracts demanded that they got rid of DDT and all these pesticides in the fields because they were there touching it every day with their hands. And so when you think about how far advanced they were in terms of advancing the story of human dignity, right? I used to think it was so corny. Oh, they're fighting for water in the fields. It just wasn't about the water. It was about the respect and the dignity that the growers in corporate America needed to give to these workers and not just treat them as disposable farm implements and throw them away, right? You know, that's what the struggle was about. And then once they were successful, they took a whole generation, and many of our friends, you know, that we know in Delano, they were able to buy homes, they were able to send their kids to college. You know, a lot of our friends, you know, I think of the Bravos, you know, they worked in the Rose Company in Shafter and Wasco. One became an architect, one became a contractor, the other became a doctor and an engineer. It's just amazing. It's just amazing the impact. And so that's part of the story that we can't forget. You know, we can't be just happy enough, I think, and I think Gail said this, you know, we can't be just happy enough that this is what they did. You know, they've left us a legacy, they've taught us the lessons, and then it's up to us and our future generations. You know, Joe was saying, I think you said your son's going to be a lawyer. My daughter's an attorney. You know, Paul's son runs a major nonprofit, and so we're sort of we have the blessing of showing them the roadmap. These guys didn't have a roadmap. They were just there with brass knuckles doing it, you know, and for $5 a week, and again, no personal benefit to them. So. We're proud to be part of this legacy, and we're proud that you're honoring Larry and all the other aunts and uncles, you know, because they took care of us for so long. I mean, who was the woman that used to come and pick us up for the haircuts? Tamayo, Mrs. Tamayo. Her husband had a barber shop. And we'd see her driving down the street, and we'd run. We were like cats being herded, and then they dragged us there, and of course.
We wanted to be like the Beatles.
Yeah.
Long hair, right? This smile, take the voice in here.
All he knew was you know, but it was like we had a front row seat. You know, we witnessed that. But it was just amazing when you take a step back and you say, here's people who were willing to give everything, including their lives, because a lot of them were beaten. Caesar's life was threatened. You know, the growers hired a contractor to kill Caesar because they thought by killing Caesar they'll kill the movement, right? And then when it was time to go out to cities to boycott, okay, there they were. The brothers were right there, first in line to go to Seattle and Cincinnati, and we took George Catalan and Rudy Reyes. And these people had never left Delano. They came from the Philippines to Delano, and of course they went to the Central Valley and Coachella, right? But we took them to New York City with no proper clothes, you know, with no money, and they were organizers. They would go organize in the stores, and they would get the grapes pulled off the stores, right? And then when they came back to Delano, they didn't have a place to live, and that's when Caesar and the board says we got to build the retirees, the Unveiling village, right? And fortunately, that village is still there today. But no, thank you so much. I can't express words. It's really amazing what you're doing. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
Okay, so I think what we're going to do is we're going to have final remarks. And Mel, I want you to know that you're standing in the way of very hungry people that have food over at a reception. Okay.
Thank you, Oren. I have to say that 23 years ago, when the concept of a museum was coming about, and I became the chairperson back in 2000 after Cecil Bonzo passed away, who had the project prior to me. Little did I know that it would come to this, where iconic people came together and shared their experiences and shared their joy. But let me quickly say that learning and applying our current and generational experience, understanding the role of farm workers, farm laborers, leaders, growers, and the public. Labor leaders and workers put their lives and family, economic life on the line. The hostile environment during the strikes, negotiations, exposed violence and threatening tactics used by the growers, law enforcement, mobs, and thugs, versus the nonviolent approach by labor leaders, the church, public supporters, and farm workers. That nonviolence went a long way, and it left a lasting impression on a lot of us. Understanding constitutional democracies and authoritarian rulers. It's important to know your rights. When your rights are being violated, the laws, the regulations, opportunity to apply equality to everyone. Under a constitutional democracy, be aware of fear and favor tactics that are used against you. Lessons learned. Understanding equality and fairness and how they work together. Example, you're allowed equal access on a board as a board member. Once you become a board member, you're treated fairly. Are you fairly allowed to voice your opinion, serve on committees, lead projects, and are your accomplishments acknowledged? That's fairness. You got equality and fairness, so they work hand in hand. Knowing the power of your political vote and economic vote. This is something I personally learned from Larry. I had the opportunity to work with Larry in '74. He led a group of us to strike at Safeway, and we marched from the Filipino Center down to Charterway to strike at the produce. And the valuable lesson I learned there was politically, you need to know the history of the people who you vote for. But economically, where we spend our money is our economic vote. Where we spend our money is an economic vote. And sometimes we don't realize that. But who we support in terms of business or individual organizations, no matter what, that is an economic vote. Acquired skills, gaining confidence in yourself over the years, learn to trust others, document with photographs, artifacts, develop your written communications and verbal communications, know the difference and pay attention to details, human rights, civil rights, equal rights, fair opportunities. Knowledge is power. And I'll summarize by saying something to remember. The sign behind me says, every family has a story. Welcome to ours. But within that family, every individual has a story. Listen to those stories, regardless of age. And I'm going to end it with, thank you, Aaron. I'm going to end it with this. And it's something that may have a religious overtone, but it's something that carries a long, heavy message. It says, faith is seeing the light with your heart, when all your eyes see is darkness. Thank you.
So we shared a lot of information today, and I hope this kind of jogs, especially the kids, Ari, Costa, Jagger, I hope this jogs curiosity, because without knowing what your history is, it's all about knowing yourself. So anyway, ask questions, ask your dad. Everybody should do that and document. Anyway, with that, this pretty much concludes the presentation. Corey and I are having a reception afterwards, and we've provided directions. If you don't have directions, let me know. There's a saying in Ilocano, "Mangan tayo," let's go eat. All right, thank you, everybody. Oh, and everybody, don't forget to sign the tiles, and then also pick up a gift that we wanted to give you guys. Please.